Welcome, everyone, to the Over Under Movies podcast, where we take a prominent figure or franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is DeAngelis. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host. He is a donut with a cowboy hat, Jason Gong.
That's right, Dylan. Now, I think there's got to be a good pun in here somewhere. I just haven't thought of one yet. So if you can think of a good name for this ensemble, let us know in the comments.
If you're watching this on YouTube, we're dressed up because tomorrow is Halloween, and we thought no better movie to talk about than the 1978 classic Halloween, directed by legendary director John Carpenter. This is a movie that you had not seen until last night, correct?
That's correct.
So this is a movie that is... I would say is one of the most influential movies of all time. It kind of created the slasher genre. It's not the first movie to ever do like a serial killer type thing like this. You know, we'll talk about like other films that influenced this one, but if you're talking about like the modern iteration of like serial killer movies and like this intersection of monster movie and murder movie, this is it. And it's a very simple movie. It's kind of a quiet movie at times. It takes a bit to get going. It's a very, very low budget movie. It's made for about $300,000, which is absurd. Made $70 million at the box office. So compared to some of John Carpenter's other movies, this one made a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was a huge hit. It has spawned a massive franchise. We'll talk about the franchise later in the podcast. But for now, Jason, what were your thoughts for watching Halloween finally for the first time?
You know, I was impressed by a lot of the technical aspects of the film, and I think it was effectively pretty scary. Michael Myers deserves his status as an iconic movie villain, an iconic horror monster guy. But I did think it was a little bit slow, like you said, and I could have done with some more kills and more visually interesting kills. I guess you said it last night, I'm a little bit modern movie pilled, and particularly with horror movies, as this trend has gone on, they really amp up the killing, and you don't expect the first slasher film to be quite as quiet and calm as it is.
So the movie, it takes place in Haddonfield, Illinois. The movie is shot in Southern California. So if you're watching this movie again, you know, for Halloween this year, take a look at the trees. That's the dead giveaway. You'll notice that the trees have all of their leaves on them, but somehow there are also leaves all over the yards.
Yeah, now how did they do that?
One of my favorite stories, there's a ton of great stories behind the scenes of this movie because, like I said, it was so low budget. They kind of had to figure stuff out, like how to keep the budget low. And one of those things was the leaves. They just reused the leaves every day. They would throw them all over the set or like wherever they were shooting that day. And then when they were done shooting, they'd pick the leaves up, put them in trash bags, and hold on to them for the next day when they threw the leaves out again. They had a leaf budget for this movie. They had to make sure not to waste any leaves, which is incredible.
Yeah, that sounds like a dream job to me. I'm currently unemployed, but if you're looking for a leaf manager, hit me up.
This movie, there's a lot of firsts for this film. Jamie Lee Curtis in her acting debut. She was 19 in this movie. Obviously, she comes from like acting royalty. So it's no secret like how John Carpenter would have like heard of her, even though apparently she was not his first choice for the role.
That's right. It came down to her and one other girl. This is a story she told, I think, just last year. Nepotism babies are in the news. So it came down to her and one other girl, and Jamie Lee Curtis got the part because she's Jamie Lee Curtis. Her mother, Janet Leigh, was the victim in Psycho. So not only is she coming from this film family, but she's coming from this legacy of slasher films. Psycho might have been, it's considered to be like the first slasher film, and then this is considered to also be the first slasher film.
Yeah, a lot of parallels you can draw between this film and Psycho. Psycho came out in 1960, so 18-year difference, but like I would say the movies are paced similarly. Both of them have like the killers are more of like a force of nature more than like a fleshed out character. The later films in the Halloween franchise try to flesh out Michael Myers as like an actual person, but in this movie, he doesn't really have a character. He's just a guy. He's a guy in a William Shatner mask.
Yeah.
That they bought for $2 at a Halloween store.
That's my favorite film story out of out of this movie. Just they had a couple of masks they could have gone with. I guess they would have turned all of them inside out, but they were looking at Nixon. They were looking at a scary clown mask, but they were like, the most unnerving one is William Shatner.
It's a tough look for our guy Captain Kirk. The guy that played Michael Myers was like a buddy of John Carpenter's at USC. USC Film School must be like the craziest place, because like you always hear these stories of these like iconic filmmakers like working there, like working on stuff there. His buddy Nick Castle plays Michael Myers. Nick Castle would go on to direct The Last Starfighter, The Boy Who Could Fly, Dennis the Menace, and Major Payne.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So just like a bunch of like random movies from like the late 80s and 90s.
That's cool. Good for him.
So that's the guy that is behind the Michael Myers mask. I think he just does it for this movie. But that's the thing about like low budget. You're just like calling up your buddies and you're like, hey, can you be in this? Big chunk of the budget of this movie went to Donald Pleasance, who plays the Dr. Loomis character, his job is he's basically the exposition guy. He needs to explain what's happening because Michael Myers doesn't talk.
But he explains very little.
Donald Pleasance was, again, not the first choice, I believe. Who else was offered the role? So he got paid $20,000. Jamie Lee Curtis got $8,000. The movie's budget was only $300,000, so they took up a good bit of that. Christopher Lee.
Yep, Christopher Lee has said that this was one of his biggest regrets, was not taking this part.
So the role was offered to Christopher Lee. He turned it down because not enough money. And same for Peter Cushing, who had just played Grand Moff Tarkin the year before in Star Wars.
It was a good role. I'll say Dr. Loomis was really the only one doing any acting in this movie. He would come in, deliver these dramatic monologues about how evil Michael Myers is, and then just kind of walk away in his overcoat. And I'd be like, damn, that was a good monologue.
Yeah, you can tell, like, the one actor, who is the one actor they paid a lot of money
who got paid for acting in this movie. It wasn't the teenagers.
Yeah, I would definitely say, like, you're arguing that this movie's overrated. I'm underrated when we get to the argument section here.
Mm-hmm.
The acting in this movie is definitely somewhere where you can poke some holes.
Yeah, I intend to. That's what I've written down on this paper.
The horror genre in general is not like the best for acting. You could say that like good acting in a horror movie is like being over the top and like not being particularly good. Jamie Lee Curtis in an interview said that John Carpenter, because they, like a lot of movies, they shot this out of order. Mm-hmm. So he had this fear meter from 1 to 10, very similar to our over-under meter. Shout out to 1 out of 10. Mm-hmm. He would give her a fear meter on how scared she's supposed to be in that scene because they were shooting it out of order. So, that's kind of like the levels of, behind the scenes stuff they had to do to, get what they wanted out of these actors. But it's a very simple story. I believe this is based on like a short film that he did when he was in film school. I forget. I don't know. I thought I had it written down. This is not his first movie. This is his third movie. He did Dark Star and Assault on Precinct 13 before this. I think it's based on a short film that he did about a guy who like sees a woman on the street and like follows her home, and he extrapolated that into this movie, which I don't know if you're making the same connection here. This is the second director that we've talked about on this podcast that did a movie early in their career about a guy who follows people around.
That's weird. Filmmakers are weird.
It's a weird connection to make. Christopher Nolan, if you're listening, let us know if John Carpenter's following movies.
Yeah, and let us know if you're okay.
What's going on there, guys? But yeah, like you said, this movie's kind of slowly paced. I mean, it's like 90 minutes on the dot. What do you think of the overall pace of the film? Did you think that like it worked to like build up to that last 30 minutes where the actual killing happens?
No, I think for the amount of story that they were telling, I think there was definitely parts where it just seemed like they were trying to stretch it out to 90 minutes, which was not really necessary. I think they could have gotten into things a little bit quicker. I think we didn't need as many scenes just kind of repeating Jamie Lee Curtis and her friends arguing about whether she should be more outgoing and try and get a boyfriend. Like, none of that came back around, really. It's. I do think this movie feels a little long for a tight 90-minute film.
Yeah, and it's also. I mean, the funny thing about it is that this is a film that like kind of created, or it's one of the origins of a lot of the tropes that we see. If you've seen Scream, And
Yeah, I like that movie.
Jamie Kennedy's talking about the like the rules of like surviving a horror movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like, first thing, you can't have sex.
Yeah.
And like in this movie, two characters have sex and they're dead within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Michael Myers does not waste time. Michael Myers is about abstinence. It's kind of one of the things I like about Jamie Lee Curtis's character is that she is kind of like incompetent. She's a final girl. The final girl is a trope that we see in all sorts of like slasher movies after this.
Mm-hmm.
Where the final girl tends to be like the not promiscuous one. I don't know like what message they're trying to send there exactly, but like she's just like a babysitter. Like an early title for this movie is The Babysitter Murders, and that's basically what the movie is.
Yeah,
These
I guess
people that are babysitting kids, and
her friend is a babysitter too, and then she gets killed because she is trying to go have sex with someone.
yeah, the movie is like pretty promiscuous.
Yeah, there's nudity and stuff in this movie.
I mean, it's definitely inspired by like the Italian giallo stuff or like the exploitation films that are like way like more on the extreme end than this. This is like pretty dialed back, even like compared to like more like recent horror stuff. I would say like it's usually more like out there with the like the visible nudity or like the woman running through the lawn with like her top off or something like that.
Yeah, and then in terms of gore and violence and stuff too, this movie isn't as over the top as even later movies in this franchise.
Yeah, there's like no blood in this movie at all, really. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis gets like a cut on her arm. I think that's like all the blood that's in the film.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we could talk about like the films that this movie inspired. 1980, so 2 years later, we get Friday the 13th. In 1984, we get A Nightmare on Elm Street, which gives us the character of Freddy Krueger. In 1988, we get a film called Child's Play, which gives us the iconic villain Chucky. A movie that predates this one is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out in 1974. Another like iconic, influential slasher film. And then you get all the way up to like 1996, we get the first Scream movie with the Ghostface killer. And even though that franchise is a satire on slasher movies, it still also follows a lot of the same tropes.
Yeah.
Of slasher films. Interestingly enough, like I couldn't find a lot of examples of like slashers like past the 2000s. It's really just like remakes and sequels and reboots of like the same old stuff. Like what's a modern slasher? Can you think of any?
Nothing that's quite as iconic as these characters, no.
Yeah. Like I was trying to think like American Psycho.
There's Your Next, which has slashers in like different animal masks, and they do a home invasion. That kind of follows some of the tropes, I would say. But for the most part, there hasn't been an iconic singular villain like Michael Myers or Jason in quite some time. Horror's going in a different direction nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that like this film is just like in the films that came after it are just results of that time period. You can like track through film history based on like what the monsters are in horror movies, kind of gives like an idea of like what the public consciousness was like, what people were most afraid of.
Yeah, it was communism.
Yeah,
Michael Myers represented communism.
Yeah, they were afraid of the others. The person that was just like stalking you and gonna come kill you in your house. Serial killers weren't really like a thing that was in the public consciousness until like fairly recently. So
yeah, I guess what you could say is that it kind of like the slasher genre almost evolved into the true crime genre, where you're getting the same type of fix reading about real life serial killers compared to just watching people in masks do it. Maybe that's what happened.
Yeah, and because I mean, all of these franchises eventually like they would evolve from like a dude in a mask killing people to like dude in a mask killing people is now like a supernatural monster that is killing people. Like they just go as over the top with it as possible. Shout out to Jason X. It's unfortunate we've never seen Michael Myers in space yet.
Not yet. There's still time.
I guess we can get into the Halloween franchise a little bit here.
Yeah, this was the first time I saw that movie. I've not seen any of the other ones.
I'm gonna go ahead and put up on screen here if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to this on Spotify or something, sorry, I'll just have to try to explain it here. I have a chart of.
Wow, you've got like a timeline over there.
This movie is kind of like a make your own franchise a little bit because there are multiple branching timelines that the sequels go into. One thing we didn't mention about this movie, a very like common plot thread in the sequels of this film is the fact that Jamie Lee Curtis's character is Michael Myers' long lost sister, who was put up for adoption as a baby, and the reason that he is stalking her is that that's his sister. In the first scene of Halloween is this really great one shot of like child Michael Myers killing his sister. So it's the idea of like, oh, he's just killing his sister again. But that is not mentioned in the first movie, and it's also not mentioned in some of the recent sequels. So here, are you ready for this?
Yeah, blow my mind.
All right, so Halloween 2 comes out in 1981. I think that's the only other one that was also directed by John Carpenter. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He did not direct it, but he was the screenwriter for it. Him and Deborah Hill, who's co-producer. She's like just as important to the making of this Halloween film as John Carpenter is, even though she doesn't get the recognition for it. Then we get Halloween 3, which is called Season of the Witch. This movie does not have Michael Myers in it. It depicts a world where Michael Myers, I believe the Michael Myers stories are like a fictional story within it. So he is not the main antagonist of the movie. He's like a tertiary character. Then we jump up to Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. And then Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers in 1995. Those films are all supposed to be sequels to Halloween 1 and 2. They're not good. If you're somebody who likes watching the entire like series of slasher movies and you have no interest in like the overall quality, like you just want to see kills and stuff on screen, there you have it. This franchise, much like Michael Myers himself, refused to die. In 1998, we got Halloween H2O. 20 years later, that's the full title. Came out in 1998. Which I feel like a lot of people like our age probably saw Halloween H2O, like either like on TV or something like that.
Yeah, I caught a snippet of it just last year on like TNT.
Yeah, it's one of those films that like they'll just like replay it because it's got like a lot of actors that you'll probably recognize. That got a sequel called Halloween Resurrection in 2002, and then the franchise went dormant until 2007. A guy named Rob Zombie decided to reboot the franchise. He went with the very original title Halloween. In 2007, it was kind of like a modern retelling of the film. It's not a one-to-one remake, but it's pretty close, and it definitely paints him more. It gives a little bit more backstory on Michael Myers. The early parts of that movie take place in the mental asylum, and it shows Michael Myers as a guy who's obsessed with making masks. It's weird.
Okay.
That movie gets a sequel in 2009.
It did?
Yes. And then the franchise goes dormant again.
What's the sequel's name?
It's called Halloween 2.
Really?
In 2009.
That's so stupid.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah, how many of these have you seen?
I've seen maybe like half of them. Flash forward to 2018, David Gordon Green and Danny McBride and like a whole team of writers, they get together and they do like a full reboot that is meant to be a direct sequel to the first film. The only other like continuity that this film recognizes is the first movie of the franchise. So they do not have the Jamie Lee Curtis is Michael Myers' sister plot line. That's not in this. That film comes out in 2018, also called Halloween. This is the third film of the franchise called Halloween. That came out in 2018. That is followed by a sequel called Halloween Kills in 2021. And then last year, Halloween Ends in 2022. I've only seen the first one of these movies. The first one is okay. The sequels are not very, like, they did not get reviewed very well. Despite the fact that box office-wise, they're the three best films in the franchise, like, by far. Outside of, like, the first one might have made more money if you adjust for inflation. But those last three Halloween movies, I mean, made $260, $133, and $104 at the box office.
Now that's interesting.
Pretty good for a horror film.
We see that there's been this fall off with the slasher genre, but clearly there's an audience for it still. Maybe they're just not willing to accept new characters and they have to go back to old ones or something, but the genre itself is still going strong, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's interesting. 13 films in the Halloween franchise. Take a guess. What is the total gross box office for all of them combined?
Say the numbers of the last three again.
Just give you a hint.
Yeah.
The top three, the recent three made 260, 133, and 104. So like 400 million total.
All right. My
Sorry,
guess.
500 million total.
My guess is 700 million.
It comes out to 1.09 billion.
Oh, that's pretty
total.
good. I didn't know any of those other sequels made any money.
Which you would say like, oh, that's pretty good, but like, I mean, there's movies that make $1 billion.
Right.
Like what, maybe 3 or 4.
So to do it in 13, yeah.
the entire Halloween franchise, which, if I'm reading correctly, it's made more money than the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise or the Friday the 13th franchise or the Saw franchise or the Scream franchise.
Really?
Its total gross is the most.
I guess 13, but like the number of movies factors in too, because Saw just hit number 10.
Yeah, you would think that like at some point one of these films would make like 600-700 million. Like it would like break through to like that next level.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
There seems to be like a hard ceiling of sorts for the genre.
Because people are squeamish. Like the horror genre is not for a wide audience. It's for people who like to see that stuff.
Despite the fact that this is like the classic type of movie that like kids like would want to go to see in theaters, like behind their parents' back.
I don't want to do that. I was scared in 1978.
When you were a kid, what was like the scary movie that like you were like traumatized by?
There's a movie franchise called Urban Legends, I think, and it's about this group of college friends, and they all start getting murdered in the fashion of different like urban legends. So like the hook-handed man outside the car and stuff like that. There is one scene where I think it's Michael Rosenbaum who plays Lex Luthor in Smallville. I'm going off on a tangent, but he gets trapped in a closet and a guy shoves a tube and funnel down his throat and pours bleach down his throat.
It's tough.
And I saw that and I was like, this is terrible. I don't like horror movies.
It just traumatizes you. You'll never bleach your clothes again.
Yeah, I don't keep that stuff in my house.
For me, it was two, and they were both films from the early 2000s. The first one is Signs.
Oh, Signs is good.
The scene with the alien on the TV scared the shit out of me.
We should do that movie.
We'll do an entire Shyamalan episode. Shout out to Philadelphia native M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
That's our guy. The second one was The Ring, specifically when the woman comes out of the TV.
Yeah.
I could never look at like those like CRT TVs the same ever again. I was always afraid that like the Ring woman was going to come out of them.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie, but I remember the trailers look scary. Now, did you watch, I assume you watched the American version of The Ring?
Yeah, I've not seen Ringu or the original one. Mm-hmm. I did see the remake, is it a remake? I don't even know. The one that came out a few years ago.
It's a reboot, I would say.
That was a movie pass movie for me. I saw it with
Nice.
I ain't paying money to see that.
I saw Hereditary with my movie pass, and that scared me. That might have been the most scared I ever was. And then we saw A Quiet Place. Well, when we both had movie pass, we saw that together. That was a good movie. I'm getting distracted. See, I just don't care about Halloween. I'm just like, oh yeah, remember this other movie?
Do you think this is the most iconic slasher franchise, or do you think like Friday the 13th or
It's tough to say. Like, they're all up there. I would say strictly because this had a very successful reboot recently, then I would say, yeah, this is like the most successful one. But you gotta, like you said, this movie made $1.09 billion, the franchise?
Yeah, the whole franchise.
And about half of that came from the last three movies. I don't know if anything beyond the first Halloween movie had much of sticking power until the reboots, it sounds like.
Or Halloween H2O, if you're somebody that watches a lot of films on TNT. Or TBS.
Yeah. But I guess this is maybe the most iconic. I don't know. I think Jason's hockey mask is slightly more iconic than Michael Myers' Inside Out Captain Kirk mask. But I would say they're about equal.
Yeah, Michael Myers is on the Mount Rushmore of like slasher movie villains.
Mm-hmm. But he hasn't, as far as I know, he has not shown up in a Mortal Kombat game yet, and that's kind of how I measure cultural relevance. Leatherface is also, I guess, on the Mount Rushmore, and then it's kind of if you have to put four up there, who are you putting up? Michael, Jason.
The Mount Rushmore of slashers, I would say, is Michael Myers,
Freddy.
Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, and then it's a toss-up.
Between Leatherface and Chucky?
Unless you want to get, like, cute with it and say, like, Norman Bates or something like that.
Yeah, or Ghostface, maybe.
Or Ghostface, yeah. It's tough. Let us know in the comments, what is your Mount Rushmore of slasher villains?
Yeah, that's a good engagement question.
Yeah, so before we get into the arguments here, let's try to figure out, like, a rating here. We're still doing 1 to 10. Mm-hmm. Feel free to email us overunderpodcastshow@gmail.com.
Why do we keep telling them to email us? We have so many comment systems.
Whatever your method of commenting that you want to send in, if you have an idea for like a better designed rating system, We'll do anything. It does not need to be numbers. Doesn't need to be letters. Anything that we can just use like episode to episode. We'll give you credit. We'll send you a gift package. We'll send you one of the posters from the set.
Those are all mine. Damn it.
How would you rate this movie, like 1 to 10?
How would I rate it, or what do I think the cultural rating is?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to come to we're trying to set the like consensus rating for this movie.
I would say that in terms of the public eye, this movie is at like a 7. In terms of like how well regarded it is, I think it's, like you said, it's on the Mount Rushmore of horror slasher films. But there's a lot of people who just don't watch those movies. And then there's some people who don't like this movie that much for reasons I'll go into when I have to argue that it's overrated.
Yeah, I would say this movie's like a solid 8. It's like 8.5 maybe. Like you can't brush past like the fact that this is a movie that influences a lot of other movies, and that just like it gets a bump up just for that.
That's true.
It like in a vacuum, yes, the movie, I mean, it's a super low budget movie. You got to also like bring that into account that like, hey, the film might be a little slow paced, or like the sets are like not, it's just people's houses, or not a lot. There's not a lot of blood or like a lot of like big effects. Like they made the movie for $300,000. It's freaking. I think that with inflation, that's like $1.5 million today.
Wow.
So that's like your reference point. Like what a $1.5 million movie looks like today is nothing. Mm-hmm. Like you don't see movies making that much money with that budget. It's like it's completely unheard of. So I would say like I don't know. We say like 7.5 for the score. Sure. 7.5 out of 10.
Yep.
All right. So before we get into our arguments for overrated and underrated, just want to give you guys a reminder that this podcast is both in audio format, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. We also have video podcasts. Full episodes go up on our YouTube channel at the same time as everywhere else. So definitely subscribe to us there. We also have a Patreon where you can, give us a monthly donation of as little as $2 a month, up to, I don't even know, what was the highest one, like $50 a month, I think.
50.
We have a whole bunch of different perks you can get for subscribing there. Not only that, but you can also join our Patreon community for free. We have like a little join button on our Patreon page, and you can just join there and see our latest updates, behind the scenes stuff that way. So definitely check us out there. We also have a Discord community where we just hang out. We talk about movies with other members of the community. We also have Letterboxd integration in that server for any of you big time film nerds that want to see what other people in the community are watching, or you just want to do like a quick lookup. That's we got some bot commands in there to do that. Or if you want to see a random movie, they got a roulette command that's really cool where it just spits you out a random movie. So yeah, definitely check us out on all of our socials, TikTok, Instagram, all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We have fun. Join our community.
Fun stuff. A lot of fun. Jason, you have the job of arguing that Halloween is overrated. You must give this argument in a donut costume with a cowboy hat.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Well, first of all, obviously this movie has inspired a lot of other films, spawned a whole genre practically on its back. But I think that this movie's lacking what some of those other movies bring, which is really exciting, gory kills. And that's what people kind of expect when they see these movies. So going back and watching this, I was a little surprised by the lack of blood and the lack of and how many kills were just kind of quiet. There's no squelching when the knife goes in. There were quite a few creative things happening in this film, but the kills themselves, except for the one where he mounts someone to a wall with his knife, were pretty standard. And a lot of them, they didn't even show the knife going in, so the knife was very cleverly hidden from camera. So that's the first thing, is that for a slasher film, you don't actually see a lot of slashing. Second, I think, like you said, there's a very simple story, and frankly, I could have done with like a little bit more story. I like a little bit of a mystery element in my horror movies. Friday the 13th Part 1 obviously has a lot of that. The Scream movies are basically all whodunit films, and I love that. The movie I referenced earlier, Urban Legends or whatever, is also a whodunit. So I kind of like it when you're trying to figure out the killer's motivation throughout the film, and this film doesn't have any of that. Dr. Loomis shows up every 10 minutes and he just says the same type of thing over and over. He delivers it great, but he's just like, this is the evil. This man, he can't be saved. We gotta stop him. And he just keeps saying that. And I'm like, okay, I get it. And it takes forever for this movie to get going. It's just slow paced. I found my mind idling a little bit as I was watching it.
Yeah, you were checking your phone a good bit. I saw you.
Nah, bro, nah. That couldn't be me. Not when this podcast is on the line. But yeah, they could have grabbed my attention a little bit more with either some exciting splatter fest or just a little bit of a mystery element, something like that. So as its own thing, I think this film is a little bit overrated. I don't think it was that scary, and I don't know. What did I give it? Maybe a 3.5 on Letterboxd.
So it's a little overrated.
I do think it's a little overrated.
I mean, listen, it's a fair argument, okay? This is a movie that was made, 40 years ago? Am I getting that math right? So it's made a long time ago.
45 years
45 years ago, yeah.
That's crazy.
Obviously, like, filmmaking's changed a little bit since then, and what filmmaking audiences have come to expect. Slasher genre has clearly evolved since this movie came out. This is like, this movie is the starting point. Expecting anything, bombastic and like over the top from like, if you watch the Halloween sequels, I'm actually curious now. It's possible you might like the Halloween sequels more than this movie because they're more gory. There's more kills like littered throughout the movie. It could just be that like this isn't the format of a film, what you're looking for in a slasher movie.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't watch that many slasher films, to be honest. But like, I just compared. I saw Friday the 13th. That was the first Friday the 13th movie I've seen, and then the only other one I saw was Jason versus Freddy, and I was like, this movie is awesome. I love crossovers because I'm Marvel pilled, and I love just stupid fights. And yeah, that's definitely something that comes up more in these sequels, I would say.
Yeah, maybe we'll watch Halloween H2O sometime, and
Yeah.
we'll see if you're like, oh my god, this is like way better.
I think I'll be more entertained at least. I don't know if I'll think it's a better movie.
So I have the job of arguing that this movie is underrated. And I think no better place to start than the way that this franchise is like ranked when you like compare it to like other horror villains or like other horror movies. Rolling Stones said that this movie was number 5 on the greatest horror movies of all time. However, if you look at like Michael Myers, which like Halloween is the Michael Myers movie, you look up like greatest villains of all time or like even greatest horror villains of all time. Like Michael Myers is just like not in the upper echelon at all. I mean, you'll see like the man that killed Bambi's mom and Bambi like ranked above Michael Myers. Or you'll like I saw one list that had like it had Thanos above Michael Myers. Like, is Thanos a bigger movie villain of all time than Michael Myers?
No.
This movie, because it's such an older franchise, I think it just gets overlooked. And listen, obviously it has staying power because they keep rebooting it, and the reboots keep making money. You cannot say that about some of these other slasher franchises. I mean, like Friday the 13th, Freddy Krueger, like they've done reboots of that. Even like the Friday the 13th remake is actually pretty good, I think. But movie didn't make a ton of money. Mm-hmm. The Halloween franchise makes money, but nobody really thinks of it as like on that same level as those other ones. This movie also didn't get any like sort of award recognition at the time. I would say like this movie should have been like nominated maybe for like cinematography. And the biggest part of this movie that is underrated, and we haven't even talked about this yet, is the score, which is also by John Carpenter. This is what the most iconic like horror theme of all time.
I was thinking about that as we started recording. I can't remember this song. Can you hum it a little bit? Okay, yeah. I kept only hearing the Twilight Zone theme in my head, and I was like, that's not it.
It's such a simple like melody. It's like, I mean, if you're somebody like learning the keyboard for the first time, you could probably like learn how to do the Michael Myers theme.
Oh, I should do that. I'll do that after this.
This movie has like only like 3 tracks that you hear like repeated like over and over and over again, and you might think that like it's repetitive and it's not good, but like it's iconic. It's insanely iconic. Like you hear that track and like your brain, it's like, oh, it's Michael Myers. That's the Michael Myers track. Jason Voorhees has like the
Yep.
but like I don't think it's like remotely on the same level. The only thing that's like maybe close is the Exorcist theme. John Carpenter, he is he's a composer as much as a director. I mean, he composed like most of his movies. The sound work on this and the music is like what really elevates this film, because like you said, it's kind of slow paced, but the atmosphere is so much elevated by the music. I think that gets completely lost in the sauce of this film, where like anytime somebody goes back and references the original Halloween, they say like, oh, it influenced all these other slasher movies and like Jamie Lee Curtis, The Final Girl. Like, no, it's the music. This is like one of the first horror films that said like music and sound is like how you really, really elevate a horror movie. And that's something we see all over the place nowadays, where, I think of like Ari Aster's movies, like the sound design of those, like it's really what makes the film like go up a whole nother level. And I think it's an aspect that's like completely underwritten. Also, I would say the main argument for this movie being underrated is the fact that they made 12 more of these and none of them hold a candle to the original. Like, I think it's the only one that's certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, even though like there are 2 other movies called Halloween that are essentially like remakes of this, and they couldn't get it right. John Carpenter, with very simple script, with an extremely low budget, was able to make this like simple movie that just worked. And I love like simple movies like that. I like tight movies, and the fact that how many other people try to throw their hat in the ring of like, I can make a Michael Myers movie. How hard could it be? Nobody else has made a good one. I mean, that's the argument right there, that this film is underrated.
Sure. All right. Well, I actually think this movie is a little underrated. Yeah, that's my conclusion. I think the things you said are all right. The things I said, I still think are right. I do think it's a little slow. I think it's boring in a lot of places and repetitive. But when you look at the technical aspects of this movie, people don't talk about it enough, I feel like. When we watched it together, Dylan was pointing out, like, oh, this is a great shot. This is a great shot. Yeah. But the thing is, he was right every time. Like, the way they lit things back then, the way they used shadow to obscure things, it was just so much better than... like, it's better than the other slasher movies in the entire genre. This is probably the one that does it the best. John Carpenter knows the language of cinema, and he uses that to evoke fear very, very effectively. So I do think if you're looking at it from that lens, it's an underrated film.
Yeah, definitely something to check out if you're somebody who's seen this movie before and you're like rewatching it for Halloween this year. Just pay attention to the camera shots. A lot of one long takes that you'll see. You'll see a lot of like single takes that are just like following a character through. The first scene of the movie is the long take of him killing his sister, which is great. But a lot of like really great wide shots, like you said, that very very deliberate, like shading and shadow going on. A lot of shots that like, I mean, he just holds on them and it ramps up that suspense. There's that great shot where like Jamie Lee Curtis is like up against the wall and the door frame is in complete darkness and you see the Michael Myers mask just come into frame because it's white, so you have that contrast to the darkness. It's perfect. It's so freaking good. And like that stuff is so good that it does like overshadow the fact that like the movie is kind of like cheesy. Like, even though like maybe we're looking at this with the hindsight of like all the tropes of the genre now, but like the fact that she keeps stabbing him and he keeps getting back up.
Yeah,
it's like kind of it's like funny, and I think that that's something that like later films in this genre have kind of like learned to embrace, like the comedy aspect of it. One film I can't recommend enough for anybody that hasn't seen it is Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which came out like 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Which that movie is a satire on slasher films and like Cabin in the Woods type movies. It's awesome. It's so funny. And if you're someone that like really likes slasher films, you'll watch that, and it's like it's chef's kiss. It's so well put together. So that's our thoughts on Halloween. We'll do other horror movies throughout the year. We don't need to just like do stuff around the Halloween season. But we thought our first Halloween episode, what's a better movie to do than this one?
Absolutely. I'm glad you made me watch this. It was cool.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to watch the sequels. I mean, we'll watch like Halloween H2O or like any of the remakes. Like if there's any of them that like particularly you think might be interesting, then yeah, we could definitely check out.
Cool.
But that's gonna be it for this one, guys. Let us know in the comments. Did we get it right? What are some of the topics you'd like to see for future episodes? Make sure to leave a like on this episode. Consider supporting the show by checking out our Patreon page. For myself, for the Donut Cowboy, Jason Gong, that's gonna be it for this one, guys. See you at the movies.